Born in London in '86, a stachio gent named Richard Parliament. He loves to wrestle, but he loves one more thing: handhelds round the world. He fights in his comments and he argues with fans. It's a problem no one understands. If there's two things he loves, it's getting at handhelds round the world. Drinking fine wine, fighting fanboys, handhelds round the world.
Top Hat Gaming Man.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here, finally welcoming you to a brand spanking new series of handhelds around the world. This week I've returned to Romania and will be visiting and exploring the country for a whole month. I have started my journey off in Bucharest, a developing city where Western capitalism and Eastern European culture collide. But with this in mind, what would a city break be without a handheld? So today I have with me the SNK Neo Geo Pocket Color, the 16-bit colour handheld from the late 90s. As expected, the handheld would be somewhat of a commercial failure due to the platform having the impossible task of defeating the Game Boy range during the rise of the Pokemon franchise. However, failings aside, that does not stop the platform from being an endearing handheld today, with a decent little library of games to its name. It is an SNK console after all. Speaking of the games, as the thumbnail suggests, today we are going to cover SNK vs Capcom, the match of the Millennium, the first ever crossover game featuring characters owned by both Capcom and SNK. As mentioned in a video earlier this week, Capcom and SNK would make a deal that would allow each company to make one fighting game each, using each other's intellectual property. Part of the agreement was that the parties making each game would receive all of the profits gained. For example, Capcom would receive all money for the game they made, whereas SNK would get all the money from the game they had created. We already looked at Capcom's offering earlier this week, so now it is time to look at the SNK side of things. Match of the Millennium is a fighting game that was released for the handheld in the winter of 1999, predating the Dreamcast crossover game by nearly a year. For a 90s handheld title, the game features an impressive roster of characters, 26 in total actually, 8 of which though are hidden and need to be unlocked. In addition to the sizable roster, the game offers a large selection of play modes and customizable options, all in all making this title pretty deep for simply a handheld offering, with a fair bit for me to cover. The game is obviously a versus fighter and looks and plays practically the same as King of Fighters R2, another great little fighting game released by SNK on the Neo Geo Pocket Color earlier that very same year. The game's roster mixes a selection of SNK and Capcom characters, just as the name would suggest. In terms of individual franchises covered, they pretty much match similar ones to those featured within Capcom vs SNK, which was released later on the Dreamcast, but SNK seems to have done a little better job with variation on the Capcom side of things with this one. In the Dreamcast game, Morrigan is the only playable character who is not from the Street Fighter games. In Match of the Millennium, on the other hand, she is joined by fellow Darkstalkers combatants BB Hood and Felicia, although the rest are still all Street Fighters. Upon powering the game on, the game's main menu instantly offers a variety of play options. We shall start off by talking about the game's tourney mode, which, as you would expect, lets you fight through a tourney. Upon selecting this mode, it then gives you 3 options. You can choose between a single, tag and team mode, which is pretty self-explanatory really with regards to what each of these functions present. Basically modes that consist of 1-on-1 matches, 2-on-2 matches and 3 fighter queue teams. But then the game gives you a further choice between average, counter and rush. These are playstyles that differ depending on your choice. The best way to describe playstyles is that they are basically the same as grooves, which we covered earlier in the week with the Dreamcast game. The average style is similar to the style found in most Street Fighter games. Basically you are given a multi-level gauge, which you must fill in order to perform super combos. The counter style is the SNK style, where you manually fill a gauge through button tapping. In addition to this, characters enter desperation mode when their life bar is nearly empty, which gives them an advantage when they are up against the wall. Rush Mode, interestingly, is inspired by the Darkstalkers franchise, which involves saving up a 3-level stock of power. This power can be used to perform a super combo, but unlike average and counter modes, will not completely drain the super combo gauge. In terms of the tourney modes, you obviously must fight your way through various encounters, much like one would expect. About halfway through a playthrough, you must face off against your character's designated rival in a quick 1-round encounter. Winning and losing this match will help determine how a playthrough ends. The final stage of a playthrough, if you lose, sees you face off against the tag team of Geese and Bison, 2 respective last bosses from the King of Fighters and Street Fighter series. However, if you are successful in defeating your rival earlier in the game, there is an additional bout against Orochi Iori or Evil Ryu. If you clear this final stage, you will get the game's good ending, otherwise the bad ending is presented. This is also helpful in unlocking the game's secret characters. The 8 characters are unlockable by beating the tourney mode. Once achieved, a silhouette appears of the secret characters covered by 3x3 grids of blocks. The amount of blocks removed will depend on if you defeated your rival along with either Evil Ryu or Orochi Iori. Once all blocks have been removed from the character, they have then been unlocked. This quest for unlockables is one of the many elements of this game that gives it such a large amount of replayability. In terms of the character unlocking process, it is also of note that this task can be sped up via transferring data from the SNK VS CAPCOM Card Fighter Clash that can also be experienced on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Moving away from tourney mode, the other significant play mode is known as Olympic mode, which involves breaking what the game refers to as event records. Olympic mode offers a whole range of things to do, from survival, where you must defeat 100 straight opponents, to time attack, where you must beat 5 opponents in the quickest time possible, to first blast, where you must fight 10 one-blow matches to achieve a high score. In addition to this, Olympic mode features minigames that are nothing to do with the fighting game genre, such as Catwalk for example, which is a very basic rhythm game, similar to Guitar Hero. We also have Ghost Trick, where you must jump backwards and forwards across ledges as Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins, whose inclusion is surprising considering they made a sprite for him for this minigame, yet is not a playable fighter. There is even a shooter minigame where you play as Marco from Metal Slug and reenact one of the Metal Slug game's final boss fights. And finally, there is Target 9 where you play as Jubi from the Samurai Showdown series in a reaction based game slashing things with your sword. When I say that this little game is packed to the brim with surprising content, I am really not exaggerating. SNK vs Capcom, the Millennium match, is very possibly the greatest fighting game made for a handheld in the 90s. Although cute and simplistic in some ways, the scale-back nature of this on the simple Neo Geo Pocket Color hardware delivers a game that is very fluid looking and responsive to play. The music in the game complements the entire experience, offering simple renditions of various famous Capcom and SNK tunes. I would guess this is one of those games that remains under-celebrated today, due to the fact that it was published exclusively for a system that basically no one owned. The game is shockingly good, and extremely satisfying to play. This may be a very controversial thing to say, but I think I prefer this one over Capcom vs SNK for the Dreamcast. But that could be partially down to the fact that I simply love games on basic handhelds. The limitations presented with these things often lead to some very unique games. All in all, I feel that the game was extremely worthy of highlighting today, and acts as yet another chapter within the Capcom vs Games history. So ladies and gentlemen, this has been the first episode of Handhelds Around the World within my month-long Romanian adventure. I plan to be back every Sunday in a new city or town looking at the history of various handheld devices and some of the gaming gems these products house. Let me know which games and systems that you would be keen to hear me cover within the video comment section. If you enjoyed this content, please give it a like, subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss a video. Finally, my channel Top Hat Gaming Man is partially funded by those who support me on Patreon, who make the daunting task of making videos full-time on YouTube just a little bit less scary. So a huge thank you to Carl Johnson, Sebastian Velez, JD Robbins, Since Spaces, Andrew Bazansky, Antonio Rodriguez, Asobi Kwang DX, Computer Man, Craig Jenkins, Michael Baker, Tom Elliott, and the rest of my generous bunch. Thank you all for the support. Yeah. Cheerio!